Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. I know I already did a Friday episode and uploaded it, but I just finished listening to the RFK Jr.'s suspension of his presidential campaign speech. And I felt just really motivated to just put down some of my thoughts, uh, especially since I just got done talking to my kids. So I figured, why not just share what I just said? So, my initial reaction was, wow, I've forgotten what an actual political speech sounds like. This is what I'm going to do. This is the policy that I'm going to pursue. And it wasn't like this kind of, I'm going to trample on other people's civil rights in order to do it. I'm not going to cater to some special interest group so that they can have what they want. And so they'll be in my pocket. It wasn't that kind of speech, which is what characterizes a lot of the political speeches that I've heard lately. It wasn't emotional. I mean, it's kind of hard to be emotional with the voice that he has, but it wasn't full of vitriol, right? It wasn't full of all of this name calling and just sort of ad hominem, right? Attacking other people in terms of their personality or their, what other people want other people, everyone else to think about certain people. But it was very, very measured, um, and I just it just made me think, oh wow, this is the way political speeches used to be, and I'd forgotten all of that, where you just listen to someone as they tell you what they are proposing for the country. I thought it was just it brought back some good memories, perhaps, maybe, I don't know. I think good memories of the way that some political speeches that I heard that I enjoyed sounded like. But it was he basically shared how incredulous he was about how undemocratic the Democratic Party is today. So they didn't have any primaries for Biden to ensure that he is their candidate, and then they replace him with someone who never got a vote. And the whole time they're talking about democracy, and I had talked about that before. He put a fine point on it. He also went on to say that he gave interviews every chance that he got, sometimes 10 interviews a day, and Harris has given none, uh, which is kind of insane. He called out the media, a lot of people who were there to cover him dropping out of the race. He talked about their censorship, their lies, and misinformation. And it seems like this is going to be the legacy of the Biden Harris administration. Just a lot of misinformation and the media helping them cover it all up. Interestingly, lately you've been seeing the media reveal some of the big um, lies that they've been saying, but it's a little bit too late, right? And one then has to question why they're doing it now. He talks about the lawfare that had been waged against him and Donald Trump by the Democratic Party, how they were spending millions and millions of dollars blocking him from ballot access, getting his name on the ballot, that when he does satisfy the requirements to get on the ballot, which apparently is getting 1 million votes, 1 million signatures, and his campaign, his staff was able to pull that off, which is like an inhuman, impossible kind of task, and yet they did it. But every time they succeeded in meeting one of the campaign ballot obligations, then the Democratic Party would like somehow try to legally block it. And basically, it's sort of like filibustering or trying to raise a technicality in the same way they went after Trump, right? They were pretty much spinning election rules in such a way to seek disqualification. And so that's basically is what made RFK Jr. have to expend a lot of his time and energy and funds on fighting all of this, roadblock. The fact that he got no press coverage, he was basically censored off of all of the major networks. And he mentioned something about only being interviewed twice on all of the major networks together in, all the months that he's been running. He also talked about, and basically the lawfare thing is very unjust. He said that he reached out to the Harris campaign to talk about his planks and to see if there was any way to incorporate perhaps some of those ideas in their campaign. Didn't even bother answering his phone calls, right? I mean, no one, agreed to meet with RFK. And when he reached out to the Trump campaign, I mean, he was welcome, right? Let's have a conversation. And they sat down together. And it is what I suspected. And I'm sure other people have said it. But to me, it was like, oh, yeah, of course, Trump campaign would have reached out to him, not to use him or abuse him, but to have a conversation. And even RFK said, that he was kind of surprised at how much they had saw things in common. Definitely, there are things that they don't see eye to eye with, but then you take away all of the media propaganda and mudslinging and basic misinformation that the media has been waging against Trump and his campaign and everything about him. He's not he's a different person. It almost seemed like he was saying, RFK was saying. And so when he shared with him his main concern, particularly the health concerns about the children here in the United States, Trump was totally for it. I mean, he was like, yeah, and if he got elected, he promised him that he would give him carte blanche, like let him do anything he wanted with regard to health reform. And so that, in and of itself was just a huge thing for RFK. And because at that point, he really believed that he could win the election, he wasn't going to drop out. But when it became clear, excuse me, that, the Harris campaign was not going to allow him to basically run, that he was now looking at becoming a spoiler rather than having a real shot at the winning the election, he's suspending his election, and so his suspending his bid. And basically, what that means is he's not going to campaign any longer. He's not out of it, so he wants his supporters to vote for him again in the non-battleground states. So states which are clearly for the Democrats, vote for Kennedy. For the states that are clearly going to go for Trump, vote for Kennedy, right? Because it won't matter. It won't affect their win. But in the battleground states where it looks like, and I guess based on his own personal research, that he was going to become a spoiler and therefore allow Harris into the White House, vote for Trump. That's what he said. And that uh, demands a lot of respect to be able to say something like that. I mean, considering that probably a lot of his supporters will never vote for Trump, right? But for him to basically say that, because the real goal is, everything that he wanted to do, he sees eye to eye with Trump, right? Ending the Ukraine war, getting rid of getting downsizing the military spending, addressing the health concerns, and I think there were a couple other things that he mentioned, but I mean, the things that he wanted to do, Trump wants to do as well. And so, particularly when it came to health concerns, processed foods, and all this other kind of stuff, he was going to basically be allowed to do what he wanted. And so, okay, if that's really what you want, you're not voting for the person, you're voting for the ideas, then you got to vote for Trump. He's going to let me do all of this stuff. Um, it makes me kind of, it's interesting that he won't mention the war of Israel. And it almost seems like because of the way the strength and the power of the pro Israel lobby is in America, you almost can't touch it, right? And so I wonder if that's kind of a strategy. Who knows? Um, so he reiterated his plan with regard to health. So I listened to all of that. It was really good stuff. Like the last third of his speech, he talked about, his vision for the kids in America. And it's a beautiful vision. And it was so much all about that unity, right? Let's find that unity and move forward in a positive direction, which I love that stuff, right? So because it's about creating peace, and he really did reject the whole vitriolic name calling, so he pointed out that the DNC, which my wife likes to point out is the Democratic National Committee, not convention, right? So the DNC mentioned Trump's name like what, 400 times or whatever, but Biden's name was only mentioned a handful of times. And then you go over to the Republican convention, Biden is hardly ever mentioned, and because they want to focus on what they want to do. So anyway, at listening to the speech, it reminded me of what my dad said when I was younger. He said that he heard the MLK speech, Martin Luther King speech that he made. I'm not sure which speech it was, but he remembers listening to it and saying, "Man, that speech is so good. He's gonna get unalived, right? He's not going to be permitted to keep living." And so he was shot in 68. I got that same vibe today, right? That the speech was just so good, and he was calling out so many people, and he becomes a threat to the deep state. And so I seriously got that vibe. Donald Trump, for as much as a lot of people don't like him, and I understand why. I mean, I can only roll my eyes every time I hear a little clip of him, you know, in a speech that he makes. And it's like he's his own worst enemy, kind of vibe I'm getting. And because he says those things, his followers get the sort of signal that it's okay to say that and repeat it. And no, that's not, he misspoke. That's not what you're supposed to say. He could have said it in a much better way. Or if you get the spirit of what he's trying to say, he should have chose different words. But anyway, and so in the same way that Trump is a threat to the deep state, and that's why they're trying to get rid of him, they're trying to make him unalive. I got the same feeling from when I listened to this speech. Uh, I mean, the Democrats, what do they got? All they have is "we hate Trump." That's it. I mean, that's not how you run a country. I mean, if you gain the White House, okay, so what's your policy? We continue to hate Trump. We're going to go after him. So what about the nuclear war? What about all this hostility? What about the economy? What about the fact that people can't afford their groceries? I mean, what about that? Oh, but we hate Trump. Oh, okay. So the rest of the world is burning, and all they have is "we hate Trump." These are not serious people, right? People who try to argue with me on social media, not so much on X because I don't know anyone there, but on Facebook, you know, if you all you have to do is depart the script, don't say something that they're not expecting, and they are at a loss for words. These are not serious people. These are just automatons, NPCs, whatever, who are just following instructions. They have no mind. They have no consciousness. If someone didn't tell them, they wouldn't know it was time to eat, kind of people. And I thought about it too. Probably the positions that RFK had are very similar to the positions his uncle had, which basically means that he's a 1960s Democrat, right? And the things that he's saying to me is just like, wow, this is so. I was waiting for someone to say this. And I consider myself sort of anarcho-capitalist, but I have more conservative, so-called Republican-y type sentiments. Not that I want everyone else to have them, but that's where I lean politically. But I like this guy, which basically means that there are no Republicans left, right? So in other words, the Republican Party is further left of him, which means there are no Republicans. 1960s Republicans, there were very few of them. They're so few, and we're just so radically left behind that we have to call ourselves libertarian or anarcho-capitalists or something like that, something in that variety. Um, so that's what we got right now. It's Trump and RFK against the deep state. Now he ain't Ron Paul, right? Ron Paul is the gold standard to me in many different ways, but because it's all about the ideology, right? It's he doesn't have to be specific because he knows that the best ideas will come to the top, right? You just need freedom. You just need government to get out of the way. But again, I'm not going to wait for another Ron Paul. I'm going to wait for someone, or I'm going to vote for someone who wants to change the direction of the Titanic. And the United States is the Titanic, right? And we're headed directly for the iceberg, and we're going to sink faster than the actual Titanic sank. And we got to start changing the course, right? We got to start turning this ship around. And so it's got to start somewhere. And instead of waiting for a candidate that is so radical that everyone dismisses them, but just to try to move in increments. And as I said in previous episodes, if Donald Trump keeps his promises and learned his lessons, makes even RFK in charge of something health related, and he gets to do everything that he says that he wants to do. And then he points someone to downsize the draw down the wars, bring the troops home, uh, do all that good stuff. Man, this would, like I said before, this would be the greatest 4 years, like the watershed moment of the United States, and that would be something awesome, not just for the United States, but also for world peace. And especially considering, I mean, RFK brought up BRICS, the BRICS Bank, and the threat that is to the U.S. and the West's economic system. I mean, come on, who else is talking about it? So if we can just move that subjectivity away from where we're headed, I mean, I'd be happy, right? Because it's a lot better than Harris getting into office. So maybe that is what we're left with at this point. I don't think it's a lesser of two evils anymore. Like, I don't think Trump or RFK is a lesser of two evils, but rather it is the start of moving in a different direction, of decreasing the power and the scope of the federal government. And I can vote for that. Well, that's it for this episode. I just was so excited uh, from watching that speech. I had to make another episode. This will be the Saturday episode, and maybe we will have a Monday episode. I don't know. But anyway, enjoy the rest of your weekend.